Where Did the Road Go is made possible by the help from our Patreons. If you enjoy the show, consider becoming a Patreon at wheredidtheroadgo.com. This month's show is sponsored by Allison Cook and Super Inframan, and I want to thank every patron for their support.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And tonight I have returning with me Taylor Bell of the Green Lion podcast.
Hey, what's going on?
And Super Inframan.
Hello, everybody.
Sometimes known as Saxon.
Sometimes known as Saxon, yes. If you have to ask who I am Saxon.
So I wanted to point out a couple of things before we get started with the show because I never mention them. For people who are into music, I also do a music show, and I kind of separated them when I started Where Did the Road Go? But I found that a ton of people who listen to Where Did the Road Go? I mean, I got fans from that show onto Where Did the Road Go initially, and then I found a lot of people who appreciate the type of music I play also listen to Where Did the Road Go? So if you ever want to check out my music show, it's thelastexit.org, and it's all metal, punk, industrial, gothic, some comedy music, stuff like that. It's just this mix of everything that's you're not going to hear other places generally. I spend a lot of time playing underground music and independent bands, and we have live bands in studio and stuff like that. And we do movie reviews and other comedy bits here and there. So if you don't like heavy music or dark music, you won't like the show. But if you like any of that stuff and you want to hear new stuff that you're probably not going to hear anywhere else, you should check it out. And it's streamable off Mixcloud. So you can just listen to whatever show you want whenever you want, and that way the artist also gets paid when their stuff is up there, and people listen to it. So yeah, I just wanted to make that plug because I never talk about it.
Oh, it is super cool too. I follow your posts on it and listen to it periodically. It sounds like everybody's always having a lot of fun.
Yes, it is a very fun show to do, and I've been doing it since '94. And I wouldn't have this show if it wasn't for that show. So. Yeah, and I put a lot of work into it, going through music and stuff every week to figure out what I'm going to play, both new and old stuff. And it's a decent amount of work. And we converted part of my old computer shop into a performance studio, since the radio station is still technically closed due to COVID.
Oh, interesting.
Which is awesome because you get to have people. Yeah, you get them to perform live on the show and things like that. I think that's so cool.
Yeah. Well, we were doing it at the radio station, but the show airs live like 11:30 p.m. to 6 a.m. Mm-hmm. So, and we're on the edge of Cornell on College Town, and it's kind of like, even though it's a commercial FM station, it's right in basically the very edge of College Town. So there's very little parking. We're airing on Saturday night, so we tell bands who are coming from 3 hours away, yeah, you can get here at 11 at night. Park on the street with your flashers on, unload up this awkward porch, and then good luck finding somewhere to park your truck,
Oh, man.
Yeah.
And here it's like, well, we can do it whenever, so you just give us a time, there's plenty of parking, and you can just pull right up to the door and unload your stuff.
That is nice.
So
that's fantastic.
We've been having fun with that this year. And it helps out bands.
About it a little bit.
What was that?
It helps out bands.
Sorry.
I love that. And I mean, like, how else do you learn about new music these days, particularly getting to listen to bands live now and then, too?
Yeah.
Like, that just doesn't happen on the radio anymore.
Right.
Yeah, the radio is very bought and sold into whatever they've decided is going to be popular.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, based on their algorithms and their research and all that stuff.
And not only that, but even if you go on Spotify and stuff, it's playing you only out of a certain selection. I mean, there's plenty of stuff on there, but there's also a lot of stuff you're not going to find on Spotify, and it's catering everything to just like, oh, you liked this? Well, you'll also like this, and that's great, but it never takes you out of your comfort zone.
Exactly.
Right, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
That's something I've been trying to do recently with, well, I guess with music. I've been looking for different bands, and Seriah, I know I've talked to you about this a little bit, and you've kind of shared some with me. I've been finding some additional ones recently. I just recently started getting into some goth music too, which is sort of new to me, but some of it's pretty good.
Yeah, some of it's great. And goth has such a wide, like metal has such a wide variety of like what qualifies as goth.
Right.
Because you get everything from electronic stuff to actual gothic sounding music.
Yep, and there's some kind of metal and rock influences in some of it, and some is a little poppier. And,
Yep.
But it's sort of, it's a vibe.
It has that dark aesthetic.
Oh, for sure.
Right, exactly. Which I'm all about.
So yeah, thelastexit.org. You can find that. You can find. I think the earliest show up is from 1996.
Okay.
Oh my God.
Which is
awesome.
That's wild.
That is just in the show archive. Like that's not even on Mixcloud because I was just there's archived shows throughout the entire time period here and there. I didn't keep them all at first. I didn't have cassette tapes cost a lot back then. And when you're doing a 6-hour show every night, that's at least 4 cassette tapes every night or every week, I should say. So I only kept a handful of shows, and I put those up so people can hear me when I was just starting out.
Nice.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But I just wanted to plug that because I never plug that. Every once in a while I mention it at the end of the show, but I never plug it at the beginning. And I should also plug that we have merchandise. We've had merchandise and shirts and stuff for quite a while, and you can find those at wheredidtheroadgo.com. And I have 2 from Timothy Renner, 2 designs, and 2 designs from the late Jeff Ritzman. So those are all up, and you can get them on T-shirts, mugs, whatever you want out of TeePublic, and the quality's pretty good because I've bought stuff off of there, and I like their stuff. Yeah,
they really are good quality shirts. I'm actually wearing my the tarot card one today from Tim.
Oh, nice. Yeah. It's nice.
Very, very soft. They actually wash really well too. They don't seem to shrink super badly.
Yeah. The sizes run a touch smaller, I think, than average, but not significantly so.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe
I would say that. I'd agree. They're always just a little like it's almost like they're kind of fitted in a way or something like that.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah.
And it was
I buy a bunch of stuff off TeePublic too. Sorry, Seriah. Go ahead.
Oh, it was also Jeff Ritzman who pointed me to TeePublic in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, nice.
Because I was using something else. I don't remember what it was, but their system for buying stuff was really messed up. And it was complicated. And Jeff's like, why aren't you using TeePublic? I'm like, never heard of it. He's like, here, go use it.
I've used a couple different print-on-demand services for shirts, and they're really hit or miss. Like some of them, you'll get a print and it's like off-center and crooked.
Yeah.
And and the shirt's fine, but some of them fall apart. But every once in a while you find a good one that you stick with.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So we were starting to talk about this before we were recording, and I said stop so we can talk about this while we're recording. You were talking about a book on Area 51, Saxon.
Yeah, it's Annie Jacobsen's book, and it's literally called Area 51, and the subtitle is Uncensored. Actually, what is the subtitle on there? If you want to read it off, Taylor?
It's an uncensored history of America's top secret military base.
Thank you.
Which is kind of a mouthful.
Close the window.
Oh, sure.
But it's an amazing book because it spends 95% probably of the content going over different bits and pieces of things that have been declassified in regards to testing at Area 51. And it's bookended a little bit by Roswell and kind of goes back to the theory that like Nick Redfern and some other people have emphasized lately, where it was a Horton flying wing piloted by drones, but they had the small children that had a particular deformity, unfortunately, that made them look like aliens. But the book is incredible though, because it gives you such insight into everything that's gone on, things that people interested in this field have probably heard alluded to. The one that I always go back to is when it starts talking about nuclear-powered aircraft. Stanton Friedman worked on designing those, and there's a debate about whether or not they were actually used. If they actually flew them, they would spread radiation behind them. And Seriah, you were saying somebody took Stanton Friedman to task, saying that they actually did fly those.
Yeah, that was Douglas Dietrich, who is a polarizing individual, to say the least. But he was supposedly in charge of destroying documents at a military base in San Francisco. And he has an eidetic memory, so he read everything before he destroyed it. And he has sort of this whole alternative history type of thing. And the thing I found interesting is if you check his facts, the facts match up. Now, of course, he makes connections between those facts that you can't check. Right. So it's kind of like, well, the facts are there, but I don't know if your interpretation of the facts is accurate. But he actually talked about Roswell. He said they were Japanese prisoners of war that were in the craft. And he said, that Stanton Friedman had flown some of these craft, these nuclear-powered planes, and that they irradiated part of the Midwest with them.
I would not be shocked if that happened. The plane designs are fascinating, too, because they were trying to figure out how to keep the pilot as far away as possible from the radioactive fuel. Right, yeah. And so some of the designs have a pod on the end of the wing where the pilot would sit, separate from the fuselage in the middle.
Interesting. Things
like that, because they're like, well, what's the maximum distance we can get the pilot away from the nuclear powered fuel of this aircraft? There's some other stuff they get into in there that basically they refer to it as the Star Destroyer in the book, which sounds a bit silly, but it makes a lot of sense, where they were looking at trying to launch a nuclear powered aircraft from Area 51 into space. Basically as almost like a early strike satellite airship that would just go around the Earth and, monitor everything and be a nuclear deterrent to other countries.
Interesting.
But that stuff it's just fascinating to see the thought processes, the things that got done. There's a big chunk on the U-2's development. There's a big chunk on the development of the SR-71. The SR-71, for folks that aren't familiar with it, started as a CIA program under the name A-12 Oxcart, and it was the fastest plane ever built. And then eventually it was used for surveillance, where they would fly over different parts of the world, take photographs, get out of there, never have to worry about being shot down or a missile catching them. The CIA ended their program with it. Then the Air Force took it up, and that's where you get the SR-71 name, Blackbird. But what's really interesting about they're slightly different, but it's almost like it looks like
clearly tell.
1980 Corvette and a 1981 Corvette.
Right, yeah, you can clearly tell they're the exact same thing. It's just slightly different, size, different proportions with some stuff, obviously different markings, but
yeah. Well, what's really fascinating too is that plane was designed in 1959, and what's really powerful about this is, as far as we know publicly that's ever been admitted, it was the fastest aircraft ever built. There was a prototype Valkyrie that I think may have been faster, but they never disclosed the top speeds of either of those aircraft. And the SR-71 was retired, I believe, in the late 90s.
Okay.
I'll have to go back and look at the date on it. NASA kept one operating for a while, but you just to do like high altitude testing and things like that. But
it's a really cool looking craft.
Well, you have to assume you don't retire something unless it has a replacement.
Yeah.
Right.
And then also consider that they built this following designing it in 1959. That's just mind blowing to me. All of the years that we've had to work on different aircraft and things like that. And so when people start saying the UAP stuff might be drone technology or something that we have, I'm like, well, yeah. We built this airplane back in not built it, but designed it in 1959. There was plenty of ingenuity that I'm sure went on between now and then.
Oh, yeah.
Yep. Looks like it was retired. The SR-71 was retired in 1998. And apparently it looks like NASA had one until 99.
99. Okay.
But we're still talking over 20 years, and whatever they were, implementing to replace it was certainly in development long before then.
Exactly. All in all, though, I would recommend anybody to go back and check out the book that Annie did. There's also quite a bit on the development of drone technology and nuclear testing. They go back to the Bikini Atoll testing, where they were using a plane that was radio controlled to fly through the mushroom cloud.
Yeah.
With a filter on it to, see what kind of radiation was in there and things like that.
If I remember right, they had some pilots do that. Was it when they dropped them on Hiroshima or whatever, they had them fly through the cloud?
They might have. I'm not sure about Hiroshima.
One of the tests, I know they asked the pilots to fly through the cloud afterwards, which just seems like, really? That's an awful idea.
Yeah, that's an awful idea. Everybody was expendable back then.
Yeah.
Not that it's any different now, but
yeah.
The amount of goofiness that went on with nuclear testing out there that's documented in the book is crazy, because they'll talk about radioactive material that's in the desert from nuclear testing that just blows around. I believe it's tritium. I'm not sure. I'll have to go back and look that up, but it's one of those things that if you ingest it, you're going to die quite painfully. And then,
to be fair, they, back then they didn't really know a lot of the dangers of these things. I'm sure they suspected a lot of them, but once they discovered, they did these sort of maverick tests and, threw things out there and were a little bit, renegade about it or whatever. And they found the consequences. And I think, since then, in a lot of ways, safety measures have been implemented. But I think, the comment about expendability is definitely apropos.
Yeah.
Even in the book, it's interesting too. Annie goes into how they were able to classify these different things so they were not become public. They used kind of like how Lockheed developed the SR-71. These were all military contractors that developed these different weapon systems on behalf of the United States. And so they didn't fall under the same kind of rules and regulations and things like that and need to know. So they were able to compartmentalize a lot of this information and just keep it quiet. So that's the other reason that, a lot of this stuff was able to be swept under the rug, and why a lot of people that were outside of developing these aircraft never knew about it, because it wasn't actually the military. I'm saying that in air quotes. It was, Lockheed Martin.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Which is a private company.
Exactly.
They have government contracts, but they're still private, which I think is why they're able to do, keep a lot of that stuff classified, so to speak.
And that's the
classified off the books. Go ahead, Seriah.
Oh, and that's the thing. I mean, when we talk about what the military may or may not have, a lot of times it's actually the private corporations that the military is, paying to do this research, which keeps it off the books.
Yes. It's very smart because they spend a lot of time, Annie spends a decent amount of time like getting into Skunkworks and how it kind of came together and how it sort of operated as like a business within a business, or a think tank within the business. And Skunkworks worked on everything that you can imagine in terms of like the stealth bomber and stealth fighter and all those things.
Yeah. There's and you were saying something about there's also a layer of radioactive dust high up in the atmosphere.
Yeah, and she covers this in the book as well. And the first place I had heard about it was a U-2 pilot was talking about it somewhere. I'm sorry, I don't know the reference on that, but it was from nuclear testing, and it had thrown debris into very high in the upper atmosphere. And on top of that, there's bug detritus that's mixed into that, because I guess it killed a lot of bugs.
Sure.
But the way they found out about it was you had these aircraft flying at extremely high altitude that were getting bugs on their canopies, or at least parts of them. And so there's a layer up there that probably has, who knows how big it is, in terms of depth, but that's irradiated and has detritus in it and dust and things like that. And the jet streams and air currents keep it up there.
Huh. Well, I guess better up there than down
weird.
Here.
Yeah.
Right. Well, we were talking about Area 51, and that's obviously out in the desert and stuff. I had heard last time I was in Las Vegas, and I don't have any details in front of me about this, but I had heard that there were nuclear tests done out in the deserts nearby Vegas, and there was some resorts or hotels these people, fairly wealthy people, would go and stay at, and it was very in fashion at the time to like sit out on these balconies from I think like several miles away, like 5 maybe miles away, and watch nuclear explosions and these mushroom clouds going off. And of course they didn't know back then that this was incredibly dangerous and like not something you want. You're sitting there drinking your martini, and you feel the you feel like the heat and the blast coming from it or whatever.
I would love to see a home movie of that, because from what I understand, I heard the same thing, and they had a schedule, so everybody knew when this particular test was going to happen, or that test. And I would love to see, something from the top of a hotel in Vegas, pointed towards the mushroom cloud coming up over the horizon.
Yeah,
right, exactly.
Like the contrast of that would just be bizarre.
It's so surreal.
When they did the test at Bikini Atoll, this is also in the book, Wernher von Braun was there. And the explosion was so massive, it rattled him. It's sort of like he couldn't comprehend what they had done, essentially, even though he had seen other nuclear testing and been involved, around like the rocket side of things and stuff like that. But he immediately left the area because it messed with his head so much watching this giant explosion go off.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, it's a surreal thing, especially I can't imagine, what the people working on the Manhattan Project were, what they felt about it. I mean, there's that very famous footage or audio, at least, of Robert Oppenheimer kind of describing what had been done, and that famous line, "Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds."
Yeah,
that whole thing.
Quote from the Mahabharata.
It clearly shook these people, and they knew what they were doing was both incredibly dangerous and totally unprecedented. But and real quick, I'm looking up the Las Vegas thing. It looks like it was significantly further than 5 miles, but I don't know how far. It looks like probably several miles at least.
Several miles. That whole area around Area 51, there's other areas out there. It was just a big vacant area of property that I think the military ended up acquiring, and there were different patches they used for different things, and a lot of it is off limits, not because of anything classified going on. It's just that they conducted nuclear tests out there, and if you go out there, you will become irradiated.
Yep. Well, hey, desert acreage is cheap.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Oh, all right. So there's this article I pulled from Atlas Obscura that I found really fascinating. It's called "The Curious Case of Norway's Disturbing Demon Wall." Have either of you heard of this?
No.
Okay.
This sounds awesome.
So it is, what is the guy's name? Okay, so the story of how Demon Veggen, or Demon Wall, came to be, I probably totally mispronounced that, came to be is as strange and disturbing as the mural itself. It's a tale of scandal, etc. That begins with Gerhard Gotaas, one of Norway's leading conservators of the mid-20th century. His work preserving and restoring medieval church art was wide-ranging and respected. But in 1940, when he entered a small village church in Solharad, maybe, to restore centuries-old artwork, he saw demons. Researchers determined earlier this year that instead of reviving a 17th century painting, Gotaas actually spent 2 years creating a monstrous mural from his own imagination. That revelation is just part of the story. The church in northern Norway was built almost 900 years ago, and the question is, of course, why he did this. And none of the other projects he's ever worked on did he do anything like this. He's always been said to have excellent work, etc., etc. The mural occupies a stretch of arched wall in the channel in the chancel that's about 8 to 12 feet above the floor. It's on such a fine scale that when you stand on the floor and look up, it's like a gray cloud. It looks dirty on the wall. It's impossible for a visitor to see the details, how strange and fascinating it is. It's chaotic, and it's so small, a figure in a figure in a figure.
Yeah.
Wow.
I'm on the article you're looking at, and I'm looking at the pictures, and it is
crazy.
Very small. Super
really
intricate.
is. I'm looking at it too. Wow. What's fascinating is he never did it again, huh? All of his other work was just what it was supposed to be.
Yeah. Some things were apparent to Kwan from the first moment she climbed the scaffolding for a closer look. She says that Gotaas wrote early in the project that he was following incised lines left by the original painter. It's not really possible to leave that kind of incision, Kwan says. It's too small. Additional analysis using UV light magnification and other methods confirmed that the restoration was actually a fabrication. Stylistically, the mural is so unlike anything seen in centuries past, both in scale and theme. While demons and devils do appear frequently in church art the world over, they do so as characters in a larger story told across the space. The demon wall, however, is just chaos. It's not anything.
It's a lot of faces, and it looks like, it looks like a lot of personality going on, but there's a great caption here on the bottom of one of these pictures. The demon wall style exhibits horror vacui, an aversion to empty space, typical of schizophrenic art.
Yeah, and it says what's puzzling is there's no indication that he ever had schizophrenia or any other similar condition. Letters and other documents he wrote suggested he was lucid throughout his career, including during the period where he worked there.
Huh. So why?
Wow.
And like you raised the question, what would have, possessed him to do this?
Yeah, that's
literally, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And I'm scanning through because I don't think I ever got to the why part. I
would imagine it's a mystery.
He undertook the project with his son Pierre, who was then in his 20s and learning the conservative craft from his father. Kwan and Anderson do not think the demon wall is the work of the younger Gotaas. However, while the father was not the best record keeper, the researchers note he did document which area Pierre worked on, the part with the fewest figures, Kwan said. It looks like he tried to follow what the father said to do, but he couldn't see what the father saw. We think the son had no part in this. Per Gotaas, now deceased, went on to have an uneventful career as a conservator without any evidence of mental illness in either father or son. Deception of some kind seems more likely, and it would have been easy for the Gotaas to pull it off. He worked at a time with few experts to critique his restorations, and with little oversight. The cultural heritage director did not question how the conservator worked. She adds that Gotaas liked to say that the restoration is a magic thing to do. He was not a scientific man. Gotaas also had a secretive work style that he could have served as a cover for deception. But again, why? Why would he want to do this,
It's very strange, and it's not at all consistent with his earlier works or his work doing any kind of restoration. It's just it just feels. I mean, honestly, it's the type of thing that feels to me like it was done out of a feeling, out of maybe a dream, or you know what I mean. Like, and there's parts of it that almost look like writing.
Yeah. There's a great picture just past what Seriah read too, where there's a matchstick held next to some of the faces. And you realize how intricate it is for scale. But yeah, I mean, it's almost like, was he in a waking dream when he made this?
I can't even imagine.
People that are incredibly creative, I think not only are you like tapping into, some, unexplained force of creativity and ideas, but, I feel like you open yourself up to what comes through sometimes. I just wonder if, the whole time he thought he was doing exactly what he said he was doing, where he's like, oh, this is what it was under here.
Yeah.
And everybody else was like watching him going like, what are you talking about?
I mean, yeah, you never know. I mean, there's a great line here at the very end. There's no reason for a conservator to change a painting he found, she says. It's like painting a mustache on the Mona Lisa.
Yeah.
You don't do that. But I think Marcel Duchamp would probably disagree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that I'd never heard of that before, and that came up, and I was just like, "That's fascinating."
Oh, it's fascinating and just like scary as heck.
Yeah,
and the amount of time it took him to do that.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I would love if like there was records of his behavior while he was doing this. Like, was he maniacal about it? Obsessive? I mean, it looks like he was with the detail and things, and the nature of the line work looks a little. Of course, this could all just be age of it too, but a little blurred, from being scribbled on in a certain way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I guess what about it really makes them feel that it was like demonic? 'Cause I guess I'm not really seeing, like horns or I don't know, forked tongues or.
It looks sort of demonic
tails.
though, and I think it's the chaos aspect.
Yeah, definitely a lot of chaos. It looks like a lot of like animals and anthropomorphic. Like I'm seeing owls and like other creatures. It doesn't strike me as particularly evil, but I guess I could see demon coming out of this. God, this thing is wild looking.
Yeah, he's got that like sort of hog-faced bigger image or part of the image in the top left corner.
Yep.
And there it looks like a priest below that's got like a papal type garb.
Yeah, it's like a bishop.
Everything else is just like faces jumbled together, and they all do look owlish. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh, just different animals. There's definitely one that at least it looks like an owl. There's sort of like, dog-like ones. Yeah, I guess a few that are owlish, and different, people looking, kind of. But there's a rhino in there. It looks like kind of on the right side. Yeah, it's wild.
He was he was channeling what he was going to create from the future, and thinking he was pulling it from the past.
I could see that. That's interesting.
It almost reminds me of like a doodle, like artists and people who are like really into drawing or painting get into this zone where you just kind of start going with something, and you can kind of make these big, not quite collages, but I guess doodle is really the only word I have to describe it. And it sort of feels like that. It doesn't feel like this was something that was planned. It looks very organic. It looks very here's the wall, and I'm going to just do the thing.
Yeah.
Here's what should be on the wall.
Right? And not to take away from it, but it does have that look of like if you were sketching ideas for a metal album cover in your notebook in high school.
Oh, yeah.
You just kept going on and going on and going on.
Well, and it even looks like someone did it with like a fine point Sharpie. Like it doesn't, it's not like an oil painting. This is if this is a painting, it's done with like a very fine brush and black paint on a gray stone wall.
Yeah.
What a wild find, Seriah. Where did you find this?
It just popped up in my news feed at some point. Probably either on Reddit or Facebook.
Fair enough.
Wow.
So, and then there was this article.
Norway. Go ahead. Sorry.
What was that?
Oh, I was just going to say, with Norway, I hope somebody has written some songs about this thing.
Oh, yeah. Some death metal.
Yes. That would be fantastic.
Black metal would be the way to go.
Okay.
Closer to black. Yeah,
Demon Wall. So this article from Wired is pretty interesting. This one came from actually 2019, but it says a bizarre form of water may exist all over the universe. A new experiment confirms the existence of superionic ice, a black and hot form of water that may make up the bulk of giant icy planets.
What?
Yeah.
Black and hot, huh?
So let's see, okay. Recently at the Laboratory for Laser Energetics in Brighton, New York, one of the world's most powerful lasers blasted a droplet of water, creating a shock wave that raised the water's pressure to millions of atmospheres and its temperatures to thousands of degrees. X-rays that beamed through the droplet in the same fraction of a second offered humanity's first glimpse of water under those extreme conditions. The X-rays revealed that the water inside the shockwave didn't become a superheated liquid or gas, paradoxically, but just as physicists squinting at the screens in an adjacent room had expected, the atoms froze solid, forming crystalline ice.
Interesting.
Wow.
And it's black?
I guess. It says the findings published this week in Nature, again, this is back in 2019, confirm the existence of superionic ice, a new phase of water with bizarre properties. Unlike the familiar ice found in your freezer at the North Pole, superionic ice is black and hot. A cube of it would weigh 4 times as much as a normal one. It was first theoretically predicted more than 30 years ago, and although it has never been seen until now, scientists think it might be among the most abundant forms of water in the universe.
Oh, okay. I mean, I guess that makes sense given the conditions of space.
Right, right. So they're saying, like, at least more water that probably exists like that, filling the interiors of places like Uranus and Neptune, and including liquid forms sloshing around, unlike... man, I totally screwed that up. Across the solar system, at least more water probably exists as superionic ice, filling the interiors of Uranus and Neptune than in any other phase, including the liquid forms sloshing around in oceans on Earth. Europa and Enceladus, I always forget how to say that. The discovery of Earth, Europa, and Enceladus. Okay. The discovery of superionic ice potentially solves decades-old puzzles about the composition of these ice giant worlds.
Huh. Yeah, I mean, I guess that makes sense.
This is crazy.
Yep.
I'm still tripped up about it being black because it's like it's absorbing light.
Well, water is so fascinating, too, because I always relate that to panspermia ideas and things like that.
Yeah.
Of course, I suppose once that would detach from a planet and go through space, it wouldn't be under the same conditions to create that type of ice and everything. But, when you have things like tardigrades that can live next to extreme heat vents and things like that, I'm like, man, there could be some strange life around those.
Well,
or in it.
Can't tardigrades also float through space without any problem? Like, they're just pretty much immortal, aren't they?
I think so.
Yeah, they're considered extremophiles. They can live in, as far as I know, like incredibly extreme situations. Cold, heat, the vacuum of space, lots of pressure, all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
So I wouldn't be surprised if little water bears were, floating around on other planets.
Yeah. And apparently scientists have already discovered, as it says, bewildering, oh man, words are hard sometimes, bewildering 18 architectures of ice crystal. And they reference Kurt Vonnegut here because they say, yes, there is an Ice 9, but it exists only under contrived conditions, unlike the fictional doomsday substance in Kurt Vonnegut's novel Cat's Cradle.
Yep.
Which is what all this was making me think of, and then I saw that in there, so good on them for referencing it.
Yeah, yeah. Oh my God.
I haven't read that, but that's where like the oceans. What happened?
The Ice 9? Freeze. So they create a form of ice that's freezing temperatures like 80 degrees.
Oh, okay. So it froze like all the water.
Right. It accidentally gets dumped into the ocean, and then it freezes everything.
Okay. Huh.
So that's a spoiler on like a 40-year-old book.
Right. I don't really know what to say about this superionic ice. It's just, it's fascinating, especially that we're able to catch a glimpse of it, even such a small glimpse.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, go ahead. Sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, to consider that it sounds like it's the most prevalent form of water in the universe.
Maybe.
For me, I always just think of, I guess, normal ice and just water, that like we have in the oceans and I get out of the tap.
And it makes you go ahead.
Well, if you're not looking for something that's incredibly hot and like a totally different density or whatever, giving off a different color or whatever, you're not going to see it until to look for it. And then chances are, if we are looking for it, we might find more of it. It might turn out that it's the most prevalent.
Yeah. Wow.
And you got to wonder, this is just something we've discovered. What else is out there that we have no idea is out there?
Yeah.
We only have what we can look at here on Earth for the most part. I mean, when you get to the far reaches of the solar system, to the far reaches of the galaxy, to other galaxies, I mean, how different our stuff going to be are things going to be out there? And how much stuff is way beyond our ability to perceive it yet?
That's a good point. Yeah, let alone just because of our our bodies, the way that we're capable of literally like perceiving a certain spectrum of light or whatever.
Yeah.
That's interesting to think about.
So this is why I say there's probably life in our own solar system. We just don't recognize it for what it is.
Right.
And it could be intelligent,
we can't even
too.
see it.
Yeah, we can't even see it.
Yeah.
It could even be made of light. It might even be here on Earth.
Right, exactly. So yes, aliens might be here. We just don't notice.
I mean, I think if something like communicated with pheromones or colors, or, and I'm still putting this in relative terms to something that, we can perceive.
Yeah.
But then what if it was like using something where, there's like quantum entanglement involved, where like, okay, it's sending a signal back and forth to other things like it, but we can't see it.
Right.
Yeah, or it exists outside of what we perceive as, even like time.
Yeah.
If you want to get into like the quantum end of things, I'm sure there's all kinds of crazy ways that stuff could exist or function or live that we wouldn't be able to perceive at all. But over time, we might be able to get glimpses and hints of it through some kind of archetypal imagery and trying to piece together messages, for instance, like say through, I don't know, lots of different people all sharing similar but different experiences.
Huh. Mm-hmm. Almost like you're describing the paranormal.
Right?
What's that?
It's just tomfoolery. So I have here a old, when is this from? 1891. Yeah.
Oh, that is a long time ago.
An erratic meteorite. The people of an out west village in a great state of excitement. That is what it says. Okay, it wasn't just me screwing that up. From Jetmore, Kansas, Special Philadelphia Times. I assume it says Kans. I assume that's Kansas. The country people living some few miles from this place and to the east of Leona River were much startled shortly after dark last evening by the approach of an enormous meteorite, which skimmed the earth for something over a quarter of a mile and at last disappeared into a small pond in the vicinity of Shackleton's farm. The glowing sphere came from the north, moved very rapidly, and illuminating the country about for nearly a mile. As near as could be judged, it was about 20 feet long by 7 or 8 feet in thickness and width, and was a most beautiful rose color, nearly translucent and very peculiarly marked, with bands of a coppery black, and bands being about 2 feet in width and placed at regular distances. Approaching the earth rapidly and at an acute angle, it skimmed above it about 20 feet in the air, marking its course by a line of dead vegetation, killed by the scorching heat as it passed. The meteorite struck the summit of a small eminence known as Wilson's Mound, which it demolished for a distance of 5 or 6 feet. This caused the stone to swerve from its course, and some 100 yards further it dropped into the pond mentioned. This it did with the accuracy that made it seem like some kind of giant hand had so aimed it. The report of the fall could be distinctly heard for half a mile around, and clouds of steam continued to rise for some time. This morning, the waters of the pond are reported to have nearly disappeared, but the meteor has so buried itself that only a few inches of it are visible. These are still smoking and are so hot that no examination of the stone is yet possible.
This was in the 1890s?
Yes.
I wonder what it was made of.
1891.
Coppery black?
Yep.
And it was still steaming and such when it was in the water, so it wasn't like it didn't burn up completely.
No.
Huh.
That's interesting.
I'm trying to see if there's any follow-up, but there isn't.
I bet landing in the water actually probably did, I guess it could do some damage, but I would imagine it would do some good for preserving what it was. Maybe. Kind of a rosy color, and it had bands of essentially black.
It was described as an almost transparent rose-colored sphere with bands at regular intervals.
Yep. Which that's that's not like any meteorite I've heard of. But I mean, there's all kinds of different meteorites out there. But that's pretty strange. I like that line about that with an accuracy that made it seem like a hand had just thrown it intentionally or whatever.
Yeah.
Kind of reminds me of the Color Out of Space, to be honest. The way it buried itself into the pond or whatever.
True. Hey, speaking of the Color Out of Space, whatchamacallit, name is talking about working on In the Mountains of Madness again.
The director or the
director?
Studio?
Guillermo del Toro?
Yeah, there we go. Del Toro.
Oh, okay. Gotcha. I thought you meant Richard, what's his name?
No. Del Toro's been talking about doing The Mountains of Madness for a while, and there's always been reasons he hasn't. At one point, I guess Tom Cruise was going to be the lead.
Oh, wow.
And the studio ended up dumping it, I guess they wanted a PG rating or a PG-13 rating, and Del Toro's like, I'm not doing this for a PG-13 rating, and it just got scrapped. So now he's going back and rewriting it, and he wants to make it much, much weirder.
Good.
Oh,
yeah, that's what I said.
That's a pleasant surprise.
If there's anybody that can make that as a movie and have it right, Del Toro's the guy. Absolutely. I've been reading about that since there's a website called Ain't It Cool News back in the day used to. Yeah. They were talking about that back in probably when Star Wars Episode 1 came out.
Yeah.
Not too long after that.
Aren't they still around? I think they're still around.
It's still up, but I don't think they have quite the traffic they used to. But,
yeah.
That was the place that spoiled movies for everybody. So I was on there all the time.
Yep. So was I.
Yeah, it was a Harry Knowles website.
Yep, that's it. He talked about Guillermo del Toro working on Mountains of Madness and also what became Pacific Rim forever on there, which is also a favorite movie of mine.
Oh, and the sequel, right?
I refuse to watch the sequel.
What is that even called? Atlantic Rim?
No, it's just Pacific Rim 2, I think.
Oh, darn. They missed an opportunity.
It is awful.
You don't say. Pacific Rim Uprising.
There we are. I was really excited for it because I loved the first one. Didn't realize Del Toro didn't do the second one, and boy, was that a mess.
Oh.
Yeah. I had so many people tell me that it was horrible that they were like, no, you love the first one too much. Yeah. Don't watch it.
Exactly.
I did not like the first one. It's probably an unpopular opinion. I didn't know what it was when I went into it. I thought it was going to be, I don't know what I thought it was going to be, but a bunch of friends and I went to go see it. They all loved it. And I went away with what was that? Like, what was this movie?
It does help knowing what you're getting into there. I totally agree with that. As someone that likes to see people in giant rubber suits fight on miniature models of cities, it was my crack. It was amazing.
Okay.
But, if that's not something you're down for or you don't know you're going into, yeah, I could totally I don't know if this is my thing.
Right.
And, some of the great old kaiju movies have environmental slants or social commentary or things like that. But, Pacific Rim was really just about having robots fight monsters, and it was beautiful.
Okay. It was my first kaiju movie, and probably the only kaiju movie I've ever seen.
Oh. The only kaiju movie you have to see is the original Godzilla.
I've never seen that. That's a black and white one, right?
Yeah, it is. So during that time in Japan, they could not make movies about the atomic bomb. And so they had to find different ways to do allegories about it. And Godzilla is basically about kind of going back to that Oppenheimer quote of man's hubris unleashing this destruction on Japan, but a bigger commentary on, nuclear weapons and things like that. What have we wrought on ourselves?
Now, what do you mean they didn't make movies about nuclear weapons?
Oh, so they couldn't do it back in the day. There was I'm trying to remember if it was something from us still being stationed there or if it was a law within Japan proper, but you couldn't make stuff about the bombs that were dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. explicitly. So they had to find other ways to tell stories about it. I think that became much more of a cultural thing as time went on, because I know some other shows that I've watched from over there that had episodes that dealt with nuclear fallout, and things got pulled just because of, reactions from the community or, from the population.
Interesting.
Yeah, I'm seeing in the film, and this is from Wikipedia, in the film, Godzilla symbolizes nuclear holocaust from Japan's perspective and has been culturally identified as a strong metaphor for nuclear weapons. The producers stated that the theme of the film from the beginning was the terror of the bomb. Mankind had created the bomb, and now nature was going to take revenge on mankind.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's cool. It's cool. After that, you get into just people in suits fighting each other, and it's awesome. But
and then you get into Baby Godzilla, and
yes, then you get into Baby Godzilla, which is awful.
And like Mothra and stuff. That's all part of that whole thing, right?
Yeah, Gamera, Mothra, King Ghidorah,
which are all fun if you're down for them. But the only one I can intellectually defend is the original Godzilla.
Yeah, I'm down for giving something like that a shot at some point. It's just never been you know what? It's a good day to watch a kaiju film. I just haven't had one of those days
that's
yet.
That's how I wake up every day.
Of course. That explains your profile picture. Now I understand.
I mean, Super Inframan in the movie, in fact, turns into a giant at one point and fights a monster. So,
of course.
It basically has everything good in life in one film.
All right. This is an interesting one. This one comes from May 30th, 2021 off scipost.org. New study provides insight into cognitive mechanisms linked to hypnosis. And it says new research provides evidence that the tendency to respond to hypnosis is linked to cognitive flexibility. The findings, recently published in scientific reports, indicates that people with higher levels of hypnotizability tend to be better at shifting between different mental sets. Despite a growing interest in the clinical potential of hypnosis, little is known about its neurocognitive underpinnings. The authors of the new study were interested in how I'm not going to be able to say this every time it comes up. Hypnotizability was related to executive functions and information processing. Through both my research and clinical work, I am particularly interested in understanding the cognitive and neural mechanisms that underlie the therapeutic processes. Put differently, I want to investigate how, neurocognitively, interventions lead to improvements in symptoms. To do that, we need to explore both how the symptoms and the interventions manifest in the brain. Hypnosis is a good model of such interventions because it serves as a great non-pharmaceutical alternative to severe psychological and medical symptoms. However, it seems not everyone benefits equally from hypnosis.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Some people just can't be hypnotized. We found We found an association between people's ability to respond to suggestions in hypnosis and how easy it is for them to shift between cognitive sets. This provides behavioral evidence for a potential shared mechanism between hypnotizability and executive functions. Practically, the more hypnotizable one is, the easier it was for them to drop the old rule system and transition into a new rule system. While there is a need for further evidence to substantiate this, some might interpret our findings as increased cognitive flexibility.
Okay. So when it says cognitive sets, that's what it's referring to with dropping one rule system and moving into another. What is that like? What's an example of that?
I'm guessing it from what I understand, it's sort of like mindsets. Like, oh, this is reality. Okay, no, now this is reality.
Okay. I was thinking like, is it social? Is it like philosophical?
It's probably all of that, I would think.
Okay. I gotcha.
Which
hypnosis is fascinating. You can do so much with it in terms of like it mentioned, it's a non-pharmaceutical way to essentially accomplish like therapeutic goals. You can I hesitate to say cure, but like you can cure things with hypnosis.
Yes, you can. And
you can also cause a lot of damage.
And you got to think about this. So, like, it seems like most people who get hypnotized for, like, UFO encounters and stuff like that are fairly easy to hypnotize. You don't hear too often, oh, they tried to hypnotize me, but they couldn't. So I wonder if the whole reason they're experiencing the phenomena in the first place is because they're able to change that rule set that
right
of their world and experience that and continue on. It doesn't they don't just ignore it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that reminds me of the people who come in to get a tarot reading, but they don't actually want to get a tarot reading, so they just sit there the whole time explaining why it's not working. It's like if you have the head for it, if you have the mindset for being flexible and being open-minded about something, it's a lot easier for it to work for you, whatever that thing is,
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if you're absolutely certain it's not going to work, it's probably not going to work.
Right? Yeah.
Did we ever talk about the time that I did the hypnosis experiment that they did in Hellier on the show here?
No.
Okay. Yeah, I wasn't sure. I don't know if now is an appropriate time to get into that.
Go ahead.
I guess that's up to you guys.
But, yeah, go ahead. It's a Wandering the Road episode. Feel free.
Sure. Let's do it. So I guess for those of you who are familiar, Hellier season 2, I think it was, they did an interesting experiment where, and actually it wasn't for the show. They had done it much earlier, like years earlier, but they included it in the show because it lined up with some other stuff that was coming up in their investigation. And they had gotten this friend of theirs or someone who was involved in another like shoot going on at the time to he had agreed to participate in this hypnosis experiment where they sat him down. They had a professional hypnotist who walked him through kind of going under, essentially, and then guided him through a false abduction experience. And this is a very controversial topic. It has become quite controversial, I think, partially because of I think there's a lot of reasons that it's become controversial. There's some ethical questions about it. I have pretty particular opinions on it, and I think partially that's because I decided to do this experiment myself. Mm-hmm. I don't know if other people have, but I had talked with some folks on a Discord server about doing this, and I decided, well, hey, I've got a mom who's a professional hypnotist. Let me talk to her and see if she'd do it. And so she's been trained in hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming and a variety of other stuff like that. And so I brought it up to her. I showed her Hellier. She watched the whole thing, and I said, I'd like to do this. And she said, okay, well, let me change it because you don't want it to be exactly the same thing. So she kind of wrote her own script, so to speak. And we sat down one day, and she guided me through it. It was not the first time I had gone under. I've been hypnotized, oh God, probably well over a dozen times in my life. And it was interesting. It wasn't nearly as dramatic or emotional as what the guy in Hellier went through. But I also was eager to do it, and I think probably in a better headspace. And it very much felt like it didn't feel real, and it didn't at any point make me feel like this is something that happened to me or is a part of my past, except insofar as it was an experience, a hypnosis experiment or experience. And basically in this experience I had sort of been prompted to sort of encounter these beings and describe what was going on. And it was, I don't know how much detail to go into or really what all I remember, although specifically I remember it felt like they, so they were these very tall, very thin alien beings, I guess. Picture the thing from the cover of Communion, but thinner and more stretched out and tall, and gray, because the mind.
Right.
And they, I was, I don't know if I was on a table or standing or whatever, but I was, in my mind, I was in a position where they, had power over me, I guess, where I wasn't really moving. I was there and they were doing stuff. And part of what they had done was sort of opened up my head and I can't remember exactly what it was, but it amounted to putting sort of a ball of black energy into my head that like joined with like a ball of white energy that was already in my head and created sort of this gray mixture, right? And that's what I remember. I'd have to go back. We filmed the whole thing, but I haven't watched it since then. But that was the impression that I had gotten, and that was the kind of the biggest takeaway, was that sort of experience. And I took it as being very symbolic. I took it as being about balance and about sort of trying to reach a balance or repair some kind of imbalance in my life. I don't think that I was abducted by aliens. Right. And that's something that part of the reason that it's controversial is people talking about, well, that guy from Hellier now thinks he was abducted by aliens. And I as far as I can tell, that's not the case.
No, I don't think so.
If you watch the show and the interview they did with him afterwards, he basically says, they ask him, do you believe in aliens? And he says, probably, I think they must exist at, somewhere, which is not what he said the first time. The first time they'd asked him before they did it, he basically said, I don't know, like, probably not. But he doesn't remember what happened. Like, that's really the interesting thing about it, is that whole experience sort of happened in his subconscious.
Yeah.
That weird. Even during the experience, as soon as he kind of like came out of it, was guided out of it, he looked like he had been dissociating and didn't remember what had just happened to him.
Which is always fascinating, that we can literally not remember something that just happened.
Yeah.
Right. Well, if you get into that state, I mean, I don't know if you guys have ever had any experiences with like psychological dissociation, but it puts you in a place where you're just not there anymore. And, something's happening and you're kind of along for the ride. And when that thing stops happening, you sort of come back into it. And it's weird. It's happened a couple times to me during like really major panic attacks.
Yeah.
Taylor, did your mom describe what the entities or the aliens would look like, or is that just purely
she asked me basically, she one of the kind of stipulations of this was that she wasn't going to lead me in any way, but obviously I knew going into this that we were trying to do something involving alien abduction, so my mind was already primed with some images. But she was pretty neutral with her wording, and essentially would mostly ask me what I was experiencing and what I was seeing, and give me some prompts that were like, where are you, or what's happening, or things like what does the weather feel like that kind of stuff, to sort of get me into the feeling. And I'm pretty used to the idea. I'm pretty used to the feeling of going under, and I know kind of what to expect. So it's not like a foreign thing to me to try to imagine something that's not happening in real life.
So does your mom regularly program you with hypnosis that you don't remember?
Oh God, I don't know.
Nice.
Oh man.
That's really interesting. Go ahead, Seriah.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, back to the reason why I asked about the aliens was back to your earlier comment about, people that are easier to be hypnotized being more receptive. And, just if that's something that your mind's just pulling out of, all the images you have, like in a dream or something like that. Or, could the act of sort of faking the abduction or the encounter actually facilitate the real thing, I guess is what I'm saying.
You mean like spur it on after the fact as like a quote unquote real life experience?
Well, actually, like during the time that it's going on, in fact, because and the reason why I say that too is because, a lot of folks, when they talk about abduction too, think it's non-corporal.
Right.
And so I'm like, okay, so just by thinking about these things, are you opening up, and the beings that appeared to you were real in a certain sense?
Yeah.
Well, I've heard stories like that, and there's one that, always comes to my mind. I don't remember where I heard this, but it's part of the zeitgeist of ufology and abduction experiences. The person who was hypnotized and was like describing some stuff that was going on, and then they said like there's a UFO outside, and people like went outside or whatever, and there was
that's
some kind of a craft.
I want to say John Keel wrote about that.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Yeah.
But the idea that it's like you're touching on something very poignant, Saxon, with the influence of the hypnosis causing a non-corporeal experience that then becomes in some way tangible. And I don't mean it necessarily has to be like physically tangible, but like having a real impact on somebody's life, and even the entities maybe being some kind of, real
other intelligence. Something.
Right.
Yeah.
And whether that's a spiritual manifestation or that's, actual extraterrestrials, or it's, light beings or whatever, like it could be anything, but that being more than just, and I hate to say more than just, but more than just sort of the imagination.
Yeah.
Right.
Or being kind of one and the same with that, and that all being sort of connected. It's really, really hard to tell,
Yeah, no, it's impossible
what would
to
we
tell.
do? Right, exactly.
I had a thing on memory here, too. That was interesting. New study finds false memories can be reversed. And this comes from ScienceDaily.com, July 5th, 2021. Rich false memories of autobiographical events can be planted and then reversed, a new paper is found. The study highlights for the first time techniques that can correct false recollections without damaging true memories. There's plenty of psychological research which shows that memories are often reconstructed and therefore fallible and malleable. However, this is the first time research has shown that false memories of autobiographical events can be undone. Studying how memories are created, identified, and reversed could be a game changer in police and legal settings where false memories given as evidence in courtroom can lead to wrongful convictions. Let's see here. In this study, we made an important step in this direction by identifying interview techniques. Yes, okay. The researchers recruited 52 participants for a study on childhood memories, and with the help of parents, they implanted 2 false negative memories that definitely did not happen, but were plausible. For example, getting lost, running away, or being involved in a car accident. Along with 2 true events which had actually happened, participants were persuaded by their parents that all 4 events were part of their autobiographical memory. The participants were then asked to recall each event in multiple interview sessions. By the 3rd session, most believed the false events had happened, and similar to previous research, about 40% had developed actual false memories of them. The researchers then attempted to undo the false memories by using 2 strategies. The first involved reminding participants that the memories may not always be based on people's own experiences, but also on other sources such as a photograph or family member's narrative. They were then asked about the source of each of the 4 events. The second strategy involved explaining to them that being asked to repeatedly recall something can elicit false memories. They were asked to revisit their event memories with this in mind. The result, according to Dr. Blank, was that by raising participants' awareness of the possibility of false memories, urging them to critically reflect on their recollections and strengthening their trust in their own perspective, we were able to significantly reduce their false memories. Moreover, and importantly, this did not affect their ability to remember true events.
So that last part is what I'm especially interested in here. How would they be able to tell that so they had 2 false events and 2 real events, and they sort of got them to admit that the false events were false?
They got them to figure out which ones were which.
So there are a couple things that have happened that are a part of my autobiographical history that are stories my parents have told me that I have absolutely no memory of. But through the stories, I've kind of concocted a sort of like visual representation of what that would be. But I don't know. I mean, that seems like, I guess the idea of that being a memory, a false memory, is dubious to me.
Well,
I don't know if that makes any sense.
It is right. It's a false memory in the fact that you don't actually remember it. You're constructing it based on things people told you. So the example I'm sure I've used before because it kind of struck me at some point. My mom would always tell a story about when I was like 5 or something, and there was a snowstorm, and the neighbor went and got milk for us, and I wanted to take the milk inside, and so she handed me the milk jug, and I started running down the icy driveway and slipped, and the milk went up in the air, and it just burst on the ground, and no more milk. And I could see this play out in my head, but one of the things I noticed at some point is I'm seeing it from third person.
Yep.
Like, I don't remember that happening. She just loved that story, and she told it all the time that I felt like I remembered it, and I don't remember it.
Right.
And by looking at the content of it and going, why am I seeing it from a third-person perspective? I wouldn't be seeing it from a third-person perspective.
Yeah, but how old were you?
Like I said, about 5, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that's... Well, I don't know. I mean, there's certainly some memories I have from being that old, but there's a lot of stuff that's just kind of not there anymore.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
So I just, I wonder if some of that stuff just kind of fades away from, like, we don't really understand what memory is or how it works. So
right. And what I'm saying is it's a false memory in that I didn't remember it. It's not something that didn't happen. It happened. It's just I don't actually remember it happening, and so my mind created a memory of it from the details my mother told me.
Okay, so it did happen.
Yes, it did happen.
Okay.
But my version of that memory was not a real memory.
Right. My memories that I'm thinking of are also in third person. Well, actually, one of them is in first person, but I don't think it's something I actually, it's like, it's definitely reconstructed from stories I've heard.
Mm-hmm. So, what's interesting about this, too, and troubling is, and you wouldn't do this to kids, but trying to convince them that their 2 real memories were actually false. And how susceptible would someone be to, well, I showed you that picture of this thing. And, how easily would it be to convince someone that a memory that they actually had was not true?
Yeah.
Right.
That when they were talking about using that to help with like witness testimony and crimes and things like that, my first thought was like, but what if you're convincing the person that something that did happen did not?
Yes.
That's pretty messed up.
Right, and that's where in this article they specify both at the beginning and the end that it helped them identify those ones that were false and distinguish between those and quote unquote real memories. I want to know more about that. I want to understand more about what these kids were able to deduce about these memories that made them realize this.
Right. Because it the implication in there is like they told them that the false memories were made up because of a story or showing them a picture or something like that. And that you may have gotten the idea from there. So, if it's, I don't want to say that simple, but, it does seem a little scary. But you want to understand the process.
Right. And in order for it really to be kind of fully scientific, you'd want it to be, I don't know if it would be blind or double blind, but you'd want the people who are working with the kids to tell them, to ask them about their memories and then to tell them like, oh, well, sometimes there are false memories or whatever processes they were using. You'd want those people to not know which memories were which.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
I'd like to see
there's more. There is a link to the paper on the on the article. So if you look for new study finds false memories can be reversed, it's ScienceDaily.com. There's a link to the paper there.
Cool. Thank you.
So that's and the thing is, memory is such a weird thing, and we take for granted that it's accurate. We just always have, and now the more and more we learn about it, the more we learn how not accurate it is. Again, this goes back to that Invisible Gorilla book, where they talk about memories being made up of the events that happened, the way we interpreted those events, and how those events made us feel, and that's what forms a memory, which is very different from just like a recording of the event happening.
Right, which is what people want memories to be because.
And we expect them to be.
Right. And I wonder how much of that is a modern concoction, or what the influences of the of like culture and stuff are on that. And I guess I mean, like, in cultures, especially in the past, where like oral storytelling was much more prevalent than, say, movies.
Right.
I wonder how different memories were perceived.
That's a good question.
Yeah. When you get to that, you also have like concepts of like before, now, and after. Some of the I think it was Mesoamerican cultures. I'm trying to remember, but their thought of the year was like every year is the same year, almost as a place. So when it's fall, you're in the same place that you were last year in fall. It's just you're on a ring.
Yeah, it's a
you're
cycle.
not moving forward.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It kind of feels like that sometimes. Oh, great. It's negative 40 again. Nice.
Yeah.
Can't wait till next year when it's negative 40 again.
Yeah. It's like things are on a loop. And then, there's the argument of, does the way we think create our language, or does language create the way we think?
Right.
Well,
that's a good question.
Yeah. So like the Aboriginals, indigenous people in Australia, don't have words in several of the tribes for like left and right.
Yes.
Right. But they are very aware of what's north, south, east, and west.
Right.
Of the cardinal directions. So they'll say, if you're hanging a picture on the wall, instead of saying a little bit to the right, it's like, well, that needs to go a little bit more to the northeast.
Yeah.
Huh.
Which is just fascinating, right?
What is it, Saxon, you would know in an airplane when is it pitch when you're rolling, or is it roll? It's called roll, isn't it?
Roll, yeah.
Okay, yeah, just adjust the roll of that picture a little bit,
Yeah,
exactly. Clockwise or counterclockwise or whatever.
Yeah, there's just different ways of doing all that, and they also don't really have the same sentence structure we do. It's really fascinating where you can put verbs and adjectives in whatever place, and everybody still understands it too, which is just fascinating to me. I would get so confused so fast.
That is really interesting when you're looking at different languages all over the world. And you see so many of them have a very similar structure. Like you can look at all the, whether it's the Romantic languages or the Germanic languages or whatever. But then you get into these very diverse areas. Like, I don't know if you've ever looked at Japanese, like, grammatical structure. It's fascinating.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it is.
Completely different.
Yeah, because it's like object, indirect object, verb, or something,
I don't even know how to begin describing it.
And
I've seen it before.
If I remember right, it's also set up so that once you identify someone, you don't re-refer to them until you change the identifier.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. It's very, very different. And you're right. Like, how much of that influences the way we think, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yeah. And then you take English, which is just a mess of all these different things mixed together, and its rules are just beautiful. All over the place.
Yeah.
Kidding. Especially phonetic rules, like how things sound.
Yeah.
What's the word? The word that spells fish. It's It's I'll have to think about it. But there's a word that's like completely not at all what you'd expect, but according to certain English, like, I don't know if they're phonemes or whatever they're called, it could be pronounced fish. It starts with like GH something.
Oh, yeah. Oh my goodness.
It's goatee. That's what it is. GHOTI. It's so GH as in laugh, right? So f.
Okay.
O as in what is it? O as in how some dialects say women. So like and then TI as in is a sh as in nation or motion. So instead of goatee, it'd be fish.
That's awesome. I'm surprised the band hasn't used that as their name.
I thought I had seen one. I guess Fish Hook, Goatee Hook, is a 1990s Christian punk band.
Huh. Interesting.
Oh, okay.
But do they call it Fish Hook? I would guess they were. If they were a Christian band, that's probably the reference.
Yeah, I think so. It looks like Wikipedia is saying that it's pronounced Goatee Hook.
Oh.
But I think the point is like Fish Hook, right?
Yeah.
So it says name. The word goatee is a phonetic spelling of fish. However, the band pronounced its name more intuitively. Okay, whatever that means.
Well, probably because no one was calling them Fishhook would be my guess.
Probably not.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the stage, Goaty Hook.
No, never mind. We are out of time. So, Taylor, where's your podcast?
You know what? I think it ran away.
Oh no.
It's I know. I gotta get a new episode uploaded. Actually, it is Green Lion Podcast. So you can find that wherever fine podcasts are downloaded, or greenlionpodcast.sounder.fm, or also greenlinepublishing.com. I think.
Okay. And your tarot deck?
That is the Sigil Arcanum. I need to update the website, but it's sigilarcanum.com.
All right.
It's sigilarcanum.com.
Nice.
Which is an awesome tarot deck. I've got two decks of it.
Nice.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And actually, real quick, I'd also like to pimp out 6 Degrees of John Keel.
Yeah, they're great.
That is another podcast. I just recently started working with them on a new project. It's called the HERA Project, which stands for Humanoid Experience Research and Analytics Project. It's a database that we're working on together.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right. And
we just did an episode that came out just, I think, today about that.
So a couple weeks in the past from when this is airing.
Yes.
Yes, definitely recommend 6 Degrees of John Keel. They've been on here before, and I've been on there. So definitely worthwhile podcast. And you can find Super Inframan flying through the air. So that's his location.
And I moonlight on Instagram, but that's about it. I don't do much social media.
What are you on Instagram as?
Super_Inframan.
All right.
Nice.
Thank you both. Where Did the Road Go is made possible because of the support of our Patreons, and particularly those Patreons pledging $10 or more: Allison Cook, Super Inframan, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Christine, 100th Monkey Project, a blue second-generation MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, Land of the Crazy and Communicable, Chris Ernst, Craig Cisternos, Craig Parmenter, Crystal Ann Compton, David Moore, Denise Sarek, Diane B., Diona Bidwell, Dominic O'Malley, Duffy Doubter, Edu Camahort, Empty K, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Joanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Kristen L., Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Roger Gonzalez, Sam Sharon, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Glimstead, Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Grebhart, Will Powell, Ren Collier, Martinez Saint, and Stephen D. Also, an extra special thanks to Vincent Trewell for doing our recaps for every show. And thank you all so very much. Of course, we continue this conversation in a long Patreon segment that I think actually is longer than this show. So if you want to hear that, it's only $3 a month, and it supports the show and helps us keep creating content for you. And you get lots of extras every month, all month long. Plus, you get the shows a week in advance, and some special gifts now and then. We're going to be doing a listener stories show sometime soon. If you have a story you want to share, please send it to stories@wheredidtheroadgo.com. And of course, everything Where Did the Road Go related can be found at wheredidtheroadgo.com. I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.